So, I wanted to talk about why victims of abuse keep losing arguments with the abuser. And I just want to preface this by saying the first mistake that we're having is that we're having the argument with the abuser in the first place. Now, the further into the relationship you go, the less of an option it becomes. So this statement is really more for those like beginning phases. And it's tricky because you don't necessarily know you're dealing with someone who's abusive or has an abuse template. There might be some red flags, but you might not have noticed. You might have a really master manipulating kind of abuser who's being really effective at hiding like who they really are. So there's a reason why a lot of the advice for people is to not rush relationships, to not rush to get to a certain level of, let's say, commitment. So if you're dealing with a person who's like, oh my gosh, we're besties, and you're like, wow, but I just met you, right? That's a kind of love bombing. That's a kind of escalation of the relationship that doesn't match, the actual process that you guys have been engaging in. Same thing for a romantic relationship, if one person is trying to push it along faster than it would naturally organically develop, that could often be because once you have that, oh, you're my partner, you're supposed to do XYZ for your partner. If you don't, you're a bad partner and you don't love that person, right? So when they escalate further than is reasonable for kind of like what you two have experienced already, that is often the reason behind the manipulation is kind of lock you in so that therefore they feel like they have grounds to stand on you to start berating you, criticizing you, or moving you into doing what they want you to do that you don't want to do. If you're dealing with your parents, that's a little bit different because there is a pre-existing relationship that is not borne up by their actions necessarily toward you, or like maybe when you were a child and then now you're an adult or something. So an abusive parent might stand on that relationship and say, well, you're my child or I'm your parent. But they haven't actually done the things that good, healthy parents do. And so they're kind of requiring you to comply as if it's some kind of a contract, when in reality that may not be the case. So those beginning stages, that's where you kind of see whether or not you or somebody, whether you're compatible. And that compatibility bit is really important because later on, when they're standing on the relationship as to why you should start to do what they want you to do and you're thinking this isn't the right thing to do, and they're standing on that relationship, you cannot compromise with an abusive person. You cannot compromise with someone with whom you are not compatible. The best you can do with someone you're not compatible is to recognize, oh, we're not compatible, and then have the appropriate distance that allows each person authority and autonomy over themselves. And so you're not merging your lives in a way that requires compromise. So abusers will often stand on relationships, and you should be doing these things. And if you should be compromising, but the compromises are one way and they're unilateral. You're the only one compromising, right? So step one is to not get into arguments with those people. But the way to not get into arguments with those people is to recognize like whether or not you're compatible in the beginning, whether or not they're even safe enough to have discussions with or arguments with or compromising with. So all of that's happening before you even get in the relationship dynamic. Then, okay, so you're in the relationship with this person, parent, partner, friend, and you find that they are starting to tell you things that they themselves are doing and accusing you of doing it. And so then you start to feel like a crazy person because you're like, well, wait a minute. You're doing that's the thing that you're doing. And then also, as they learn more like psychological concepts or abuse concepts, then they start like wielding them. So let's say you identify it, but wait, no, that's the thing that you're doing. One, you're already on the back foot, and I talked about that in my arguing with assholes on the internet video. But two, you are basically now in a position where they're going to probably accuse you of Darvoing, right? Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And then you're like, wait, but I'm not doing that, you know? And again, it's them putting themselves in that position as the arbiter of reality over the situation and what's happening. And so, yeah, they're going to accuse you of the things that they're doing, and it's called projection, and there's like a whole psychology behind it. And then they may not necessarily be committed to an ideological framework, let's say. So when you're not ideologically committed to a framework, but you're trying to be right, that gives you so much freedom to change positions. Oh, this one's not working. I'll just move to the next one. And I mean, no offense, incredibly effective in an actual debate, like traditional debate, not in an interpersonal relationship, where you're trying to win the debate. So it's like, oh, this didn't work. All right, let me do this one, and then you can move. Debate things do not belong in relationships, by the way. If you are even having to think this way, you should not be there. Anyone that is not cooperatively in a relationship with you for everybody's mutual benefit and best interest is not a person who is in a relationship with you. They're just trying to put you in a role and then enforce that you enact that role regardless of how they treat you. So yeah, also, just on a side note, don't use these tips or ideas to argue better with an abuser. Even if you win, you will lose, because either you stay in the relationship because you think like, oh, now I'm in a better position, or they get so angry they just shift to physical aggression and domination. So again, this is not so that you get better at responding to an abuser in an argument dynamic. It's so that you can you can notice it when it's happening and go, okay, this is more confirmation that the person that I'm dealing with is not a safe person and is not someone I should be in this dynamic with. And they are using everything they can against me. So anyway, back to the thing. If you don't have an ideological framework, you can just change. You can change your position as long as you're still trying to win the argument, right? You just move to the next thing. Whereas victims are often, again, trying to be good people, ethical people, moral people. They've got a framework of how they understand the world to be working. Like if you're good, these are the things you should do. This is the way you should operate within the world. And so they have this framework they're working within, and you can't step out of the framework. Otherwise, you've now given up your own credibility. So like you can lose the argument that way. So then now you're trapped in this framework. Well, the abuser's not trapped in the framework. The abuser's just trying to win. The abuser's just trying to arrogate over you so that you'll do what they want you to do. You'll feel how they want you to feel. That shame that they can trigger within you will then become like a self-regulating governor on you, even when they're not around. They're convinced you that you're the worst, possibly abusive, whatever it is. So healthy people recognize, oh, this is not a good situation, and we should not be here. We should be separate. So yeah, so the abuser's not working on that framework. I like to think of Ellen, the DeGeneres with the TV show, well, used to TV show, and so she built her whole front facing identity, public facing identity as like the nice person, and oh, just be kind to each other at the end of every show. And I do sort of wonder if like it started off and she was happy and she was like dancing and living her best life, and then it just got to be so like the grind, and it just got to be so repetitive, and then maybe like she just got to a point where she's like, well, this is the identity I built and I can't do anything different now, and I just have to continue to enact it like a performing monkey, and just got to a point where she's saying the words, but she's not that person anymore, or she's not in that emotional place anymore. I don't know. Again, just some random. I like to think about sometimes why people change or are different than they appear. So it could very well be she was garbage from the beginning. I don't know. But I was just thinking about like this other thing. But Imagine she pulled a Yeezy. Imagine she's Kanye and she's like, I'm the best. I do what I want. Fuck y'all. Right? So then, when Yeezy's being Yeezy, people are like, yeah, okay, that's who that is. He didn't put himself in this like kindness framework. And so but again, victims of abuse are often attempting to be ethical, moral people, treat others the way they would like to be treated. And so they're in these dynamics with someone who's able to use that against them. And so they end up being forced sometimes to be in a position where, okay, either sacrifice the identity that I built and the way that I think people should treat each other to protect myself, or I go be this person I don't want to be. Again, the only winning move is to recognize these people and to be like, oh, I don't want to be here. Because that you will often get forced into a position where you're either having to submit to them or kind of become aggressive and destroy your identity of who you've built yourself up over the years. Again, people that hate goodness, they love to identify like who they consider to be a weak person. And to them, nice equals weak. So if you're a victim of abuse and you're thinking, well, I want to be a good person, that means being nice. All right, now we built the framework. Okay, and then someone else sees that and says, oh, I have an opportunity here. But in order to defend yourself, you have to not be nice. Do we see the catch-22 that's occurring? So one way to preserve your ability to be the person you want to be means getting better at discerning the people, the person that you're dealing with. And that also means when we're feeling the emotions we're feeling, emotions are information. They are not outcome. It's not fate. You're not twin flames. This is not a soulmate situation. You're not meant to be best friends. All of the things that people will come up with in terms of narratives as to why something is fated and it's this outcome you can't choose and it's bullshit. You get to choose. So you just, that's why I also recommend highly, hold off on having sex, because many a victim has been trapped in an abuse dynamic because the sex was so good very quickly. And so then it's hard to think your way out of the situation because you really want it to work, right? So you can't, once the feelings are engaged, once you're emotionally motivated to desire the outcome that you and this person are together, then you are no longer in a position to effectively analyze the situation. So really the freedom that a victim of abuse has to get to is to realize like, oh, we're assuming this is all adults here. We're grown, we're adults. We are not automatically responsible for each other. If we choose to, we engage in that, and we do it in a safe, healthy way that doesn't, sacrifice one person for the other. But generally speaking, that interdependence is not built on destroying another person. Okay, so you have your framework, right? And you're in your framework, and the abuser has no framework. They're just doing whatever they want. And so sometimes they'll stand on moral ground, and then sometimes they'll stand on social ground, like, well, no one would do this because that's just stupid. Again, they're just moving around. They're gonna see what works, what sticks, what's most effective to you, what's most effective to anybody who's like watching the situation. Their goal is to get you to do or not do the thing that you don't want to do or not do. And to kind of leverage that control over you. Again, healthy people don't want to tell other people what to do. Healthy people want everybody to be a grown person who's able to, relatively take care of themselves and contribute to taking care of the family. So there's this mutuality, and it's not all on one person or the other. And as soon as people start to perceive that's the case, you often see abuse dynamics flourishing because one person is going to feel like they're being taken advantage of. And once you start to feel like that, you can move into a position where you're acting in ways you wouldn't prefer to act. And so this is why you see abusers in victim spaces, victims in victim spaces. It can get very complex, figuring out like who the abuser is. And so again, if we all recognize we're grown, we're responsible for ourselves. And then as we're in this relationship, we've chosen to be mutually interdependent. We've chosen to have responsibilities and obligations, but like, don't let somebody rush you into that. And you can always choose, oh, this is not working, not the best option for us. We should do something different here. It's not a fated determined outcome forever till the end of time. Like, no, 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 no. Let's see. Yeah. So they will definitely, they use whatever framework they want. Another thing they'll do is as they learn who you are, as they learn your buttons, let's say, they're going to use those buttons if they haven't installed them themselves. So I've mentioned this before, but the whole like, oh, you're just like your father, you're just like your mother kind of language, or, remember that time you did that terrible thing, if someone is truly like an unsafe, terrible person, a normal, healthy person is going to say, "Oh, we need distance here. I cannot. This is not a safe situation." But unhealthy people, low-key toxic people, they see that as leverage. Well, now I have leverage over you, and I'm going to use that leverage to get more leverage. And then suddenly you're trapped in this dynamic where you're like, "How did this happen?" It's because a normal person walks away when they recognize a situation is not a good or safe situation for either or both parties. Toxic people will stick around. Toxic people will make you think you've signed a contract and that you can't ever leave. Nope, nope, nope. Unsubscribe, delete. Nah, absolutely not. There is also this idea where often victims are letting abusers choose the debate ground. And I had this discussion with my son yesterday because I noticed we're going to all of these basketball tournaments. He's in middle school. He's tall. All the coaches want him on their teams. So now we've gone from D&D and anime to now we're doing a whole bunch of sports. And so I've been trying to pay attention and learn. And I noticed all the kids had these like not exactly flip-flops, but apparently they're called slides. And I thought, okay, I guess they're doing this so that they can change into the specific expensive basketball shoes that you only wear on the court that you do not wear outside. Absolutely not. And I was like, okay, let me go get them some slides. And I'm looking at the slides of these, and I'm trying to figure out which shoe to get. And I go, oh, Adidas. Okay. Adidas are like a solid choice. That cannot possibly be a bad choice. So I go to Amazon, I order the Adidas, and then, my son was like asleep at that time. So in the morning I tell him like, hey, I got you these slides, thinking, best mom, gold star, great job, me. And he was like, oh, mom, they're all wearing Yeezys. And I was like, Yeezy has slides? Also, are these like $200 shoes? Because we're not doing that. This is the team he's on. They're like private. They're like a private school team. And I told him, listen, they may have Yeezys. That doesn't mean you have to have Yeezys. And also, because here's the thing, right? This isn't that situation where you tell your kids to just be in that one down position and then that they just have to live there. Absolutely not. I told him, look, you choose the ground. If you can't win on this ground, you pick different ground. So if you're dealing with wealthy people, choose the ground you win on. The ground you win on is authenticity. The ground you win on is being real. The ground you win on is having credibility from having real lived life experiences that their money has made easier for them. So if you can't win on like social status like that, you switch it to cultural authenticity. Okay? You stand on the ground that is the ground for you to stand on. You don't let them choose for you. You don't let that make you feel inferior in some way. Who cares if they have the Yeezys? You get something else. And you got realness. Wealthy people will try to buy authenticity to kind of like accumulate it themselves. That's why so many people are telling their personal stories about their personal trauma and everything they've been through. It's because they're trying to establish authenticity. That's how much money it is worth. It's worth money. So if you're a wealthy person, or let's say you have a degree and the other people don't have a degree, and you're in a group of people where you're feeling very intimidated because they're acting like having a degree is stupid and why do you spend all this money? No, 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 no. You don't let them choose that ground. So I 100%. If I'm in a group and I'm like, oh, okay, everybody's bougier than I am, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go a little hood with it. If I'm in like an environment where everybody's more hood than me, I might go a little bougie with it. I might bring out the hood. I don't know. I Whatever is what I feel confident in standing on is what I'm going to do. And so I'm teaching my son, like, you choose the ground, you stand on it. You don't make them choose it. You don't make them feel ashamed about who you are, where you come from, what you've done. Within the realm of reason, of course, guys, like if you've murdered somebody or something, sometimes shame is a little bit of a good thing depending on the situation. So again, you're almost never going to see me be like, this is the rule, other than let's be safe and make safe choices and not be around people that we can't be safe with or who aren't safe with us. Because as soon as you start doing that, someone's going to come in and try and weaponize that framework against you. And I'm like, not today. Anyway, so you choose the ground that you want to stand on, and you be confident in it. Let's see what else. I feel like there was like one other thing. Anyway, that's a pretty good roundup. Just in general, you stay centered. You stay centered in who you are and understanding, because you are your own person. You are a grown adult. You making decisions for yourself. You have authority over yourself, and therefore you are the arbiter of things for yourself. We have flexibility in who we allow to influence us, but as soon as we realize this is not a safe situation, regardless of who's at fault, not a safe situation, this person is not a safe person to influence you, or to allow to have that access to be able to influence you, then getting distance is really the healthy and appropriate thing to do. So many victims are going to try to stay in the abuse dynamic. They're going to try to win the abuse dynamic. They're hoping this person will change because their idea of who they are is based off the beginning. When they rushed and love bombed, and then it got you to the point where you committed and you said, "Oh, this is who we are." There is one of my favorite authors is L.E. Modesitt Jr. He writes science fiction and fantasy. I don't like his science fiction, but I love his fantasy. And part of his construct for the world, of the magic of the world is not good and bad. It's order and chaos. The order, if you have too much order, it freezes everything, and it makes it so rigid. And the chaos makes everything so unstable and chaotic, right? And then there's kind of like a second magic framework that I really love that I often use, and it's from the Belgariad, and that's written by David and Lee Eddings. I'm not saying read it. I'm not saying read any of these. This is just my own personal. And their concept of magic, or the forces, spiritual forces in the world. The spiritual force of, let's say, good allows people to change, allows people to make decisions, allows you to become something other than you are. The force that is the darkness, the evil force, is the force that never wants anyone to change, and never, like, you commit to this identity, and that's it. That's who you are forever. And you can never do anything differently. And not only that, but I'm going to determine whether or not you're doing this right. And so when I think about the abuse dynamic, I think about, like, they'll stand on, oh, this is right or wrong. And the thing is, it may or may not be, and it's not even really relevant. What's relevant is, are you an adult who gets to choose for yourself? Do you have autonomy and authority over yourself? And then, are we using that, appropriately, reasonably? And that's why having a therapist is so great, or people outside the immediate relationship dynamic, so you can get a reality check, or as I like to call it, adult supervision. What's reasonable here? What makes sense? And I posit that if you're at that point where you're questioning, am I reasonable? Is this reasonable? Like, what's going on here? Automatically, the answer is no, you should not be in this situation. That already has disqualified. But a lot of victims don't like to hear that because they're emotionally attached to this other person. And so part of the piece of getting out of the abuse dynamic is untangling all of those little not ways you've knotted yourself to this other person. You are not in stasis where you can't ever change. You do not want to be in a situation where there's no foundation other than whatever the abuser feels like, because that's chaos. You are not in a position where where you are stuck in one thing forever. That's the beauty of getting to be a human being, is even if you're wrong, and I'm not saying that you are, but even if you were wrong, you may not be wrong now. You may have learned and have become a different person. So if they're using things from 10 years ago, then that may be highly inappropriate. And again, a reasonable person is going to go, oh, this isn't good. We shouldn't be here together. At the end of the day, if you're in a relationship dynamic where you're having the arguments, that is not the relationship dynamic for you. You need distance, you need boundaries. And by boundaries, I don't mean, oh, I'm setting a boundary here. I mean, you recognize, oh, we need distance from each other to preserve who we are so that we can continue to make decisions for ourselves and continue to maintain autonomy over ourselves because we're grown people. Grown people. Healthy people do not want to coerce, control, or manipulate other grown adults. Anybody who's comfortable doing that, even if they feel like they're right, automatically, nope, that's not a healthy person. What they think is right is, at this point to me, no longer relevant. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.